I'm Mike Bartica, and welcome to the latest edition of Don't Take This as Gospel, now with Shameless Nudity. We're covering Jordan B. Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. This is going to be the first of two videos on Dr. Peterson's work. I had thought there was going to be more, but let me tell you, there's not a lot of religious material, or as much religious material in the book as I would have thought. That I wanted to draw upon in particular, and if you buy this book, you're going to probably feel like you're in for a bit of a bait and switch, because although it says 12 rules for life, and it comes across for that reason as a self-help book of sorts, it really winds up being a lot of philosophy, such that 80% of the book is reasons why you should help yourself, and then only about 10 to 20% is the actual here's how you help yourself kind of admonitions or ideas of what to do. It's not structured in such a way that it's supposed to like try and lead you to, here, do this every day, or try this out, or, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not going to be that kind of self-help book, but it is going to give you a very, very good philosophical underpinning of why helping yourself is really the best thing you can do to help change the world in a positive way. And to make yourself into a better person is going to have more impact on the world than you know. So, all that being said, it's a good book. I just don't, feel slighted if you read it and you think, well, this is not really what I thought I was going to get, because, that is the way that I kind of felt when I was reading it. But I am looking forward to his next book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. And let's move on to the commentary on our specific topic, which is shameless nudity. Did I mention that already? We are talking, of course, about the situation in the Garden of Eden, and Dr. Peterson writes in 12 Rules for Life, Adam and Eve don't seem very conscious at the beginning when they are first placed in paradise, and they were certainly not self-conscious. As the original story insists, the original parents were naked, but not ashamed. Such phrasing implies, first, that it's perfectly natural and normal for people to be ashamed of their nakedness. Otherwise, nothing would have to be said here about the absence of shame. And second, that there was something amiss, for better or worse, with our first parents. Let's focus for a moment on that little clause there, for better or worse. There are some themes, even within Judaism perhaps, but definitely within Christianity, where people try to interpret Adam and Eve's situation in the Garden of Eden as being incomplete, as if they had not yet fully evolved into what they were supposed to become. And so this lack of nakedness actually indicated some sort of deficit in them. And that's certainly how Dr. Peterson is going to interpret it, especially since he's approaching things from an evolutionary standpoint for the most part. But really, in mainstream Christianity, and just from the idea of the text and all the consequences that befall Adam and Eve as a result of their fall and having their eyes opened, as we'll see later, it's the Bible presents it as an undeniably negative event, that they should have done what they were about to do, which is, God told them the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was forbidden. They eat the fruit, their eyes open, they notice that they're naked. And this in the Bible is described in unambiguously negative terms. So any idea that this was their eyes being open to their nudity was something for the better it's not interpreting the text correctly. Now, Dr. Peterson kind of goes down this tack when he goes through his section, The Naked Ape. What does it mean to know yourself naked, or potentially worse, to know yourself and your partner naked? All manner of terrible things. Naked means vulnerable and easily damaged. Naked means subject to judgment for beauty and health. Naked means unprotected and unarmed in the jungle of nature and man. This is why Adam and Eve became ashamed immediately after their eyes were opened. Their faults stood out. Adam and Eve made themselves loincloths right away to cover up their fragile bodies and to protect their egos. Then they promptly skittered off and hid. In their vulnerability, now fully realized, they felt unworthy to stand before God. There is so much wrong on this slide. There is so much that Dr. Peterson gets wrong about Adam and Eve that it's kind of breathtaking. Let's take it from the top. Naked means vulnerable and easily damaged. Where were they? Where were they that they would have any particular vulnerabilities to damage? They were in paradise. They were in a walled garden. They were in Eden. They were in this idyllic, utopian area where nothing could possibly hurt them. So the idea that their nudity means, oh my gosh, we could be hurt. Hurt by what? Next line. Naked means subject to judgment for beauty and health. Judgment from whom? They are the only man and woman in existence. Who are they going to be judged against? And moreover, these are the perfect man and woman, or the original man and woman created by God. So even God is not going to judge them amiss for beauty and health because he created them exactly as he wanted them to be. So there's no reason to think they would have been under any sort of judgment for beauty and health either. Naked means unprotected and unarmed in the jungle of nature and man. Now this would make sense if they were actually in the jungle of nature and man, but they weren't. They were in Eden, they were in paradise, they were in utopia. This was the ideal environment. That's part of the whole point of the Genesis story, is to say that God created mankind and placed mankind to live in this ideal good world. So Adam and Eve made themselves loincloths to cover up their fragile bodies and to protect their egos. And again, cover up their fragile bodies from what? Protect their egos from whom? Now, there's a little bit of truth in here, but it's not in the sense of their have something wrong about themselves in this physical standard. In their vulnerability, now fully realized. So here we have Dr. Peterson basically saying it's like they realize they are these vulnerable to attack beings. Attack from whom? Attack from no one. So that really doesn't make any sense. And it's only now that they realize it. So they were always created in this, imperfect state, this vulnerable state, and now they know they're in this vulnerable state, and oh my gosh, and that's why they cover up. And they cover up and they feel unworthy to stand before God, who created them in this vulnerable state. So, this is all really self-contradictory stuff, and it makes me want to go full Luke Skywalker on Dr. Peterson and, utter his famous quote from The Last Jedi, amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong. By the way, I love The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. I'm not making that up. I know a lot of people have panned it. I walked out of the theater thinking, oh my God, they finally made a good Star Wars movie. And this is from me having been a Star Wars fan for many years. I even put The Last Jedi up above the original. And the only reason I do that is because when I watch the original Death Star battle now, and I'm not going to say too much because I avoid spoilers even on famous movies like that, it's so incomprehensible. The tactics at the end are so incomprehensible that it just boggles my mind. So if you ever have a chance to watch the Star Wars series, there's 9 movies in it now, of course, plus a couple of other ones that they have in as addendums. So that's Solo and Rogue One. Feel free to watch that all the way through and then see if you agree with me that The Last Jedi is the best of the entire series. But anyway, I don't want to go full Luke Skywalker on Dr. Peterson because he actually does get a couple of things right. And one of those things is their faults stood out. All right, that is actually true. Their faults stood out. And they felt unworthy to stand before God. Okay, those are probably the two true statements about Adam and Eve that are on this slide. What's true about them? Well, see, here's the thing, is that Dr. Peterson's been talking about how Adam and Eve, before and after, really hadn't changed any in their actual mind and body, but they all of a sudden they were ashamed of themselves for being what they had been all this time. But that doesn't take into account the actual text. What is it that happened between Genesis 2 and Genesis 3 and the end of Genesis 3 to make them different? And it was the incident of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This was a fault of theirs that they did not have before. So Adam and Eve had faults where they did not have before. Not physical faults, not mental faults, but moral faults. They had disobeyed God. And that is why they felt unworthy to stand before God, because these faults of theirs were faults that they possessed not between each other and not to themselves. They had convinced themselves that it was okay to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They had convinced each other that it was okay to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The only person who they had not convinced that right was wrong and wrong was right was God. These were moral faults before God. So the shame that is being experienced by Adam and Eve is like the shame of a child who's just had his hand in the cookie jar and been caught by a parental figure. And now that child has to deal with the shame of being known as a disobedient child, with the shame of having this moral fault on his or her account. That is the kind of faults that we're talking about here. So when Dr. Peterson goes on, many reasons for taking a dim view of humanity are applicable to others as much as to oneself. They're generalizations about humanity, nothing more specific. There are a lot of people who are like down on the human race, we suck compared to animals, blah, blah, blah. But those are generalized reasons. But you know so much more about yourself. You're bad enough as other people know you, but only you know the full range of your secret transgressions, insufficiencies, and inadequacies. No one is more familiar with all the ways your mind and body are flawed. Now, he gets a little close here when he talks about secret transgressions. But then when he's going into insufficiencies and inadequacies, and especially when he rounds it up with your mind and body are flawed, well, now you're going back to the whole idea that somehow you are created as something that is less than it ought to be, which is clearly true of us now, but it wasn't true of Adam and Eve according to the story. They were created exactly as God made them. And so to talk about how their mind and body are flawed as if God created them insufficient in some way is just wrong. If you really want to look at Adam and Eve before the fall and Adam and Eve after the fall and try and figure out, okay, what was introduced that made them different before versus after? Well, before the fall, they had sinlessness to their credit. They had blamelessness to their credit. They had nothing to hide from God or anyone else. And after the fall, well, now they have sin. Now they have shame. Now they have to hide parts of themselves that they don't want God to see. So if you really wanted to talk about the secret transgressions, insufficiencies, and inadequacies that you have, it's not about your mind and body being flawed. No one is more familiar, rather, with all the ways you have sinned before God and man, and especially, in this case, before God, because God is the one who laid down the law. Man, in this case, kind of convinced each other, so probably should have eliminated that portion. In fact, let's go ahead and eliminate that portion. So, you see, I have my own little insufficiencies and inadequacies. No one is more familiar with all the ways you have sinned before God. So that is the perspective of Adam and Eve before and after the fall. Before the fall, they were not sinners. After the fall, they were. And it is that quality that led them to do this hiding of themselves, first by trying to create loincloths and then just basically staying out of sight in the bushes when they felt that God was coming around. So that is what I really want to impart to you on this, is that when people start talking about, and I really kind of chalk this up to the fact that Dr. Peterson never wants to engage with God the way that the Bible actually depicts God. And I understand that because he's drawing on from so many different sources, and he's wanting to kind of generalize and use other references as the Tao Te Ching and the other scriptural references and philosophical references and Nietzsche and various other philosophers. But if you really want to talk about the Bible from a relevant point of view, relevant to itself, you have to allow yourself to experience and interpret God as God is presented in the Bible, as an actual being, as a someone who can judge you and who will judge you and to whom you must give an account. That is how you have to interpret God, because if all you do, and I'm guilty of having done this myself the first time that I ever read the Bible, because I, as an agnostic, the first time that I read the Bible, I was taking every experience of the word God in the Bible and turning it into static. It was like I was actually hearing static in my head instead of the word God, because I didn't, as an agnostic, know how to interpret the word God as anything other than some sort of nebulous conceptual form that really was unrelatable. And so it wasn't until I got deeper into explorations of Christianity and eventually became a Christian myself, though I no longer am one, I did not know how to read God, as God of the Bible, as God who exists, as God who is a person who judges you and whom you must relate to, because it is this relationship that is the most important one throughout eternity that you will ever have. So that is the one thing. I mean, if Dr. Peterson, God willing, were actually able to watch this presentation, that's one of the one things that I would ask him to take away from this, is that you have to look at God as God and read the stories in the Bible as if when they talk about God, they mean God. They don't just mean an idealized representation or an idealized abstraction. They mean an actual being. And if you can posit that being in your mind and relate to that being, then you will have so much more insight into what the Bible is actually trying to say. So anyway, the book that we've been taking our material from is Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. I've got a link to this book, an affiliate link, in the video description. Do pick up a copy. There is a lot of valuable stuff in this book, and I am looking forward to his next book in this, well, it's a 2-book series, really, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. So thank you for watching. We'll have one more video to go on 12 Rules for Life, and I will talk to you later.